Welcome to Fred Achando Analysis, ladies and gentlemen. For those who are supporting this channel in one way or the other, thank you very much. Now, the World Cup is on, and that striker from Ecuador, Valencia, was just too strong for Qatar. And if Qatar is going to be eliminated in the group stages, then the sensation is gonna go down. You can imagine how the Qatarians are going to feel. Viva Africa, Team Africa, from where you are, we are behind you. And this time round, tutafika mahali. And please bet responsibly. Allow me to request you, if you're watching our channel for the first time, kindly hit the subscribe button and click the notification bell. YouTube will notify you when we do a video like this. And please give our videos more likes so that YouTube can rate them higher and recommend them to more viewers. There is a story that is carried in the People's Daily magazine. This story talks about how African leaders went to the United Nations Climate Conference in Egypt, a very optimistic team. But when they were leaving that summit, they were disappointed with what took place there. You see, every year, world leaders converge in different countries to try and look into the climate change crisis. Since the inception of industrialization, there are nations that have built industries that are really making good products that is helping the world. But the emission of the gases that are used in those industries have become a hindrance and have led to environmental degradation. And the United Nations has numbered those nations that are leading in gas emission and are labeled as the major polluters of the environment. They include China, United States, Japan, Germany, Korea, England, name them. These are the major polluters because they emit a lot of carbon. And the penultimate conference that took place before this one in Egypt took place in Glasgow, Scotland, in the United Kingdom. And in that meeting, John Kerry from the United States of America led this nation, the major polluters of the environment, and they had a lot of declarations. One of them, it was a collective declaration. They said that they were going to reduce the use of coal as energy because coal has been mentioned as one of the major polluters of the environment. And so they said that they were going to reduce the use of coal. The other thing that they agreed in that summit in the United Kingdom was that each and every nation was tasked with the responsibility to reduce deforestation. This careless cutting down of trees without replacing them, because this has been identified as one of the major causes of environmental degradation. And the third one was that the major polluters, especially in Europe, were going to they were going to advance a remedial fund to developing countries that have been worst hit by environmental change and climatic change. And these nations majorly come from Africa. So from that meeting, African leaders were looking forward to the meeting in Egypt as one that was going to be a turning point for them. Africa has been hit by drought as a result of climatic change. In fact, if you are an African and you're living in Africa, you will attest to this, that there is a lot of drought, animals are dying, there is shortage of food, but people don't have food, people are dying and animals are dying, rivers are drying. And there's a lot of flood also as a result of climate change, and strong winds like cyclones that have hit the South African countries. These all are happening as a result of climatic change. And the major players are coming from Europe. Yet Africa is on the receiving end. They are the victims. So when this summit in United Kingdom came up with this raft of measures, the last one was very paramount to Africa. The advancement of remedial fund. The Horn of Africa is now worst hit with hunger and drought. Not only that, even where I come from, in Kenya today, people are dying. In fact, we rely on some, we are given a packet of maize flour, and that can hardly take you for a day. So when African leaders attended the summit in Egypt, they were full of hope. But activists and these leaders have said that when these major players came and they took turn to speak, number one, the advancement of the remedial fund that had been promised in the penultimate conference was pushed and delayed to 2024. So you can imagine African leaders who thought that this time round they were going to be given this money. They have been pushed to 2024. And then they're saying that there was no tangible remedy that was put forward by these major nations that was going to tackle these effects and the crisis of weather change because Africans are suffering. There were no major long-term remedial plans that was put forward. Everything that was said in the last summit, it is like they negated them. They reneged in all these promises. And it is said that African leaders came out a very disappointed team. And I looked at this article that said, do we really have to blame the Europeans? Who do we blame for this? Because this is not the first time when Africans are claiming that they are being shortchanged, that they are getting a raw deal. Who do we blame for this, ladies and gentlemen? And it is going to be part of my analysis. And I want to say that Africans are co-authors of their own problems. Because one, we are not united so that we can begin as a team. Africa is a rich continent, full of resources, full of natural resources, name it, gold, coal, everything. But it is the poorest continent. Why? Our leaders are divided. Other continents, leaders from, some Asia, America, and Europe are dividing African leaders because they know that when we are divided, we cannot come up as a team and negotiate. You see, when you negotiate as a team, you are stronger because you are carrying the voice of a whole continent. But you see, we are disintegrated into individual countries. So when we go there, each and every person will speak on behalf of himself. And this is not going to help Africa. There are several leaders like Patrice P.L.O. Lumumba, who has been meeting African leaders to talk to them, presidents, giving speeches, telling them to unite. Because the rallying call to unite did not start the other day. The founding fathers of Africa, Kwame Nkrumah, Jomo Kenyatta, Julius Kambarage Nyerere, all these leaders started this talk, and they were telling Kenyans, they were telling, I'm talking with Kenyans because I'm Kenyan, they were telling Africans, unite, because if we don't unite, very soon neocolonialism is going to crop up in Africa. Because we had just gotten independence in Ghana, in Kenya, in Nigeria. Africans had just kicked away the colonial masters. And these founding fathers had the sight of an eagle. And they knew that if Africans were not going to unite, then the neocolonialism, the colonial masters were going to come back. And here we are again, ladies and gentlemen, we cannot unite. The other problem that is ailing Africans is that we have become a puppet to the Europeans. We have got leaders who have been imposed on people. And as a result, they have been compromised. They cannot question when things are going wrong because they are masters are the perpetrators of all these failed promises, and they cannot. You see, if you have been compromised, when your master is doing something that is wrong, you don't have the audacity. I'm sure most of our African presidents could not sit there and ask them, why are you pushing this remedial fund to the year 2024, yet our people are dying of hunger? Yet we have floods affecting our continent. We have strong winds. Why are you pushing this fund? Why don't you give it today? Because this is very urgent. When people are dying, we are not going to wait for 2024. There were no commitments from these major players, China, Japan, America, where there were no major commitments of how they are going to help Africa to cope up with the environmental change that has come as a result of their own activities. So the impostures are doing us a blow. Africans must stand together, and our leaders, Africans must be allowed to elect their own leaders. Leaders who can stand in the face of the West, the Europeans, when they meet in Europe and tell them, we cannot accept this. As it is, ladies and gentlemen, we have got puppets. And I'm not saying all of them. I love Africa and I love our leaders. I'm talking of just a clique who have been imposed, and therefore they are compromised and they cannot question the Europe when Europe is wrong. Africa is also a major enemy of itself. Instead of focusing on being self-reliable and self-independence, we are focusing so much in the Europe. Currently in Kenya, where I am, there is an investor from Georgia who is cutting down baobab trees, and it is taking it to Georgia, giving Kenyans about 100,000, 200,000, taking advantage of the hunger situation and the poverty level. The government is not talking about it. If you look at the reports, the National Environmental Management, the NEMA, has petitioned this case with the Director of Public Prosecution to look into it. And I was just wondering, what is wrong? What is the president? What are the authorities doing when we are cutting down trees? Yet it is mentioned that baobab tree is an African indigenous tree. It is our heritage. The African Baobab Alliance is complaining and they have condemned this, but it is still going on. The baobab tree is capable of withstanding harsh weather conditions, yet it is being cut. A lot of felling is taking place. And you look at Africa and you are wondering, what is really happening? This is the time when we need to preserve this tree, because the country is grappling with the drought. And the only plant that can withstand that drought is being taken away. And it is not only Kenya. We have got leaders in Africa who still engage in tea and timber trade. They cut down trees under their patronage and protection, and they sell without replanting. And so there is nothing that can happen if the leaders, led by the topmost leaders in African governments, are engaging in illegal businesses of cutting down trees. Instead of focusing on our development agendas, Africa is full of coup d'etat. We are busy burning the midnight oil, planning on how to overthrow another leader. And this is the reason why Africa will continue to be poor. Africa will continue to beg, because we are not focused on what is important to us. When people go for elections, we do not have credible elections. Those who are in power want to stick for too long. We have leaders in Africa who have been there for over 20 years, and when you ask them, they tell you they have vision. And you wonder, what kind of vision are we talking about? If up to date we depend on the euro. The other time when we had the corona pandemic, Africa depended on USA and Europe for vaccines. And you tell us that we have visionary leaders. Those who lose do not want to accept. Why? Because there is no democracy in Africa. Africa, as I repeat, is an enemy of itself. Ladies and gentlemen, So the article is talking of an Africa that is crying foul that they have been shortchanged in the climate conference. Yet, Africa cannot stand together and negotiate as a team. Africa is still fighting with itself. We have to wait for Europe to come and sit down with Africans to tell them to have peace in their own continent. We have Africans who are still cutting down trees. Simple things are just trying to implement zero tolerance to deforestation. Where are we headed, ladies and gentlemen? Can we sit down our leaders and tell them to wake up and stop burying their heads in the sand? Let us move with the other continents. When they are in the 22nd century, let us be there with them. Let us focus on industrialization. We have the manpower. Africans are running and seeking seeking green card to go to the US. Why? We are running away from war. At home there is war, there is drought. We cannot focus on ourselves. We cannot focus on our industrialization. Let us empower our universities now to start doing a lot of research so that we can also produce our own products. Let us limit importation and measure on exportation if Africa has to go far. Let us unite as a team so that we don't cry foul in every summit. Now we are waiting for 2024. When we get there, the major players will still push it to 2030. And then there's nothing we will do, ladies and gentlemen, as long as we still depend on the Europe, as long as we still depend on Americans, as long as we are still their puppet. Let us wake up, Africa. And that is my take, ladies and gentlemen.